Good afternoon, everyone. Maybe let's just give 5 more minutes for all the participants to join our webinar. In 2 more minutes, we can begin the session. I'll start with the introductions, give some few housekeeping notes, and what to expect from this webinar. Okay, great. Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Welcome to our session on securing critical infrastructure in EMEA beyond traditional cyber defense. This is a live webinar hosted by CyberWaze and featuring one of our partners, CYFIRMA. Just some notes before we begin the webinar. This webinar will be for 1 hour or up to 1 hour, and you may raise your questions during the session, and it will be addressed during the Q&A session towards the end of the session. And without further ado, let's begin. Let me start with introducing myself. I am Fatima Buenaventura. I am the head of alliances and partnerships in CyberWaze, and I will be your host and moderator for today's session. For today's session, our focus will be regarding the critical infrastructure in today's is no longer just an IT concern. It directly impacts national security, economic stability, and public safety. So what we are seeing across the region is a shift, and cyber threats are becoming more sophisticated, often tied to geopolitical developments, and traditional security approaches are no longer enough. And I think this session is very relevant and very timely for the current regional situation. Wherein in today's session, we will focus on what's changing in the threat landscape, why traditional defenses are falling short, and what organizations in Middle East and Africa region should be doing differently. I'm very excited to introduce our guest expert for this session. Joining us today, we have Dr. Saurabh Lal, President at CyFIRMA. Dr. Saurabh brings deep expertise in cyber threat intelligence and has been closely tracking down advanced and state-aligned actors that are targeting critical infrastructure globally in our region. So he will be sharing key insights and practical strategies that the organizations within MEA or MENA can adopt. So without further ado, Dr. Saurabh Lal, over to you.
Thank you, Fatima, and good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure interacting with everybody today. As you can see, we will be drilling down today and trying to understand how's the threat landscape really moving when it comes to securing critical infrastructure with a focus around Middle East and Africa region. It is all about understanding why the traditional approaches and why the traditional tools are no longer working for defenders like you and me. So we want to very clearly understand, and I hope the font is not too small, so I'll expand it a bit. The critical infrastructure around MEA is seeing a growing wave of sophisticated attacks. You can understand that it is no longer just the uh, what we are seeing within the geography, but there are lots of geopolitical reasons and motivations which are actually turning the tide into different avenues and different scenarios being orchestrated when it comes to impacting or attacking the infrastructure. And please understand, you may be a small mom and pop shop, you may be a small and medium business or enterprise, you may be a large enterprise. Everybody is dependent on the critical infrastructure, be it energy, be it gas, be it oil or gas, be it telecom, be it government institutions, and these have become prime targets because that's how the fabric of a society can be very easily impacted just by one target impacting everybody around there. Just imagine if the power station down the road gets impacted because somebody installed a malware and they are no longer able to distribute the power to that particular locality or that particular county. You can imagine the significance of that attack and that disruption to the society. Take the same example in telecom, or even for that matter, if you want to do certain booking of services of certain government institutions. And if you have situation like that arising from disruption, it's going to disrupt how that particular society behaves and operate. Now that's just the disruption part of it. We're not even talking about data. As we all know, data is the new currency in this new world, and cyber criminal groups are increasingly looking for avenues in how they can get their hand on citizen data, and this can be easily done by impacting some of these critical infrastructures. So we are seeing a growing trend around it, and subsequently in the subsequent slides I'm going to drill deep into that. Bottom line, these shifts and these changes are not something that we're going to see. We're already observing it. And I think people in the region have probably noticed this shift, specifically because of the geopolitical considerations which have shown themselves in the last 2 months or so. So let's go further and let's understand, right? What are these salients? So we can see, as I explained, critical infrastructures are experiencing, or sectors are experiencing, a sustained increase in cyber activity. So you name it, right? Cyber criminals, script kiddies, APT groups, which are trying to further their geopolitical motives in trying to execute the agenda of their geopolitical masters. And it is also known for, I think, experts and defenders like you and me, that even well before a first bullet is fired, even in a particular skirmish, it's these cyber attacks which increase. They can bring down the ATM networks, they can bring down the power grids, and that is what we're trying to see here. And it is this activity which is increasingly getting polarized by geopolitical dynamics. And the geopolitical dynamics is very simple. You may not be involved in that geopolitical skirmish, but let's say if the prime minister or the king of that country favors one particular side, we automatically become the enemy from the other side. And that's good enough reason for somebody to start initiating some of these adverse interests around our crown jewels, specifically in the critical infrastructure space. Now, not to also mention, it's a connected world. It's a connected world where economies are being driven by digital transformation, digital connection. And what usually happens is, unless you have a shift left approach, unless you have an approach around understanding the preemptive cybersecurity, accelerated digital transformation will usually result in expanding attack surface. And ladies and gentlemen, that is the entry point into your environment. Whether you are a critical infrastructure organization or whether you are a mom and pop store, that is the first place where cyber criminals will look. So, how lucrative as a target cannot be identified just by restricting yourself to having a visibility within the perimeter. And the potential economic and operational impact is substantial in this case. We're talking about disruption of industries. We're talking about disruption of people being employed, just because the economic fallout of some of these attacks cannot be sustained, and industries have to close, or businesses have to close. Now, I'm going to expand this more so that everybody on the call can see some of the fine prints. Now, when we look at some of these areas, right, as to why traditional cyber defense falls short, it's about defending the core. Now, the traditional defense mechanisms is always about, hey, can I see it? And if I can see it within the perimeter, I can protect it. But the controls are becoming obsolete, because some of these controls were actually created way back decades ago, and they are not in tune with the changing and the evolving threat landscape. Let's take a very simple example. Many of us grew up in the dial-up age, and now we are talking about 5G and 6G. You need to understand what it took for an attack to be executed years ago. If it took hours and days, nowadays it's minutes or sub-minutes. So the aspect of how you need to protect your crown jewels is definitely changed, and the obsolete controls which you have based on some of these traditional tools, they're not going to work. Then the patching gap, right? The famous, Patch Tuesday and new advisories being sent out there. But think about this, right? It's not only about a CVSS score being utilized as a narrative. You need to understand what is your targeted exposure risk score around some of these areas. And you need to also have a continuous mechanism to understand if something got released on Tuesday, what's the landscape like on Wednesday, on Thursday, or Friday? Because a cyber criminal is not waiting for you and me to patch some of these vulnerabilities once a week, once a month. They are going to use any small, entry point into your environment to cause reputational damage. Specifically in the critical infrastructure space, right? The IT/OT convergence is giving lots of momentum in the growth of some of those organizations. But at the same time, the vulnerability in this space is also seismic, because some of these OT controls, some of these OT systems were actually not meant to be accessed outside one particular perimeter or one particular location. But now with the IT OT convergence, through IT into OT, you are exposing yourself not only to some of those expansion mechanisms, but you are also opening yourself to some of those vulnerabilities getting exploited. And at the same time, we have always been talking about the fact that cyber is having a connection to some of the kinetic attacks being targeted and being executed, and that's also quite visibly seen out there. And if you look at some of these scenarios in terms of high stake consequences, it's about disproportionate impact being executed, and this is also getting expanded in at national level, because the modern threat actor is always having two intentions. One, intent to disrupt, and they're not working like you and me that, all right, I'm going to invest this amount of money and I'm going to get something out of it. No, their objectives are very sophisticated. They are aligned to their state masters, and that is something we all need to be aware of. And that's why there is a need to move from traditional to preemptive securities. Organizations have to evolve from, rather than just reacting to breaches, to preventing attacks before they happen. And let's take a look at some of these areas, right? And I'm going to zoom it out again so that everybody can see it very easily. It's about trying to understand, uh, you know, you cannot, as part of traditional approach, continue to have a focus around just perimeter and what you see around it. We cannot have continue to operate in a model wherein an incident happens, we go and execute and remediate it, and then we wait for the next incident, and so on and so on. It cannot just be an IT centric protection, because cyber risk is a common ownership. And it cannot just be periodic assessments. I've heard many sizes saying, "Oh, don't worry, we do VAPTs every quarter or every half a year." That is not good enough. You need to have continuous monitoring, and it has to be very cannot just be signature based, right? So you have to look at some of the preemptive approaches that we keep talking about, and which we find are useful with some of those clients and customers that we are supporting, because it has to be external threat focus. Please understand, 99% of your threats and risks which are coming towards you or which you'll ever face, they always originate from outside your perimeter. There are only two stages in cybersecurity, ladies and gentlemen. Either you are hacked and you know, or you are hacked and you don't know. And you will not be able to have a visibility unless you have a preemptive approach to that, because you will just be thinking, oh, I'm doing all good. And then one fine day, the persistence established by the cyber criminal will get exposed. So you need to understand, and you need to have predictive and proactive defense components as part of your cyber posture management. You need to protect both your IT, OT, cyber, physical layers as one offering. And this can only happen if you can have continuous monitoring. If you are not having a continuous monitoring, and if you are not having an intelligence driven detection capability and mechanism in the AI age, ladies and gentlemen, it will become very, very difficult for all of us. And when we say intelligence driven detections and capabilities, please understand there are, when we are talking about intelligence, there needs to be very clear five attributes for any intelligence that you're consuming. And if you do not have those five attributes, then something is missing. You need to very clearly understand who's interested in you, why are they interested in you, when possibly can they launch an attack, what is their motivation, and what are they looking for, and how. Most of the intelligence insights is around this last piece, how, but it misses the strategic component, it misses the management component of who, why, what, when. And unless those are part of your cyber posture narrative, you are not part of the preemptive approach, and you will always be playing a reactive game. Expanding further again and helping you understand the industrial divide, trying to navigate the IT and OT. So you can see, right, there are rewards of convergence. There is enhanced operational performance, but if you do not have the predictive maintenance capability, you are going to, have the challenge in terms of legacy environments being vulnerable. There will be cyber criminals who will come from IT into OT, and there will be lateral movement, or there will be external exposure, something that we are able to already see in the MEA region. So it is very important for all of us to understand that IT and OT, specifically in the critical infrastructure, is an existential risk. It's a security challenge. And unless you have the predictive capabilities inbuilt, it will be very difficult for you to address it. So let's also understand, right? The convergence is, yes, eliminating traditional isolation between IT and OT environments. But then you have the situations around legacy OT protocols, which lack built in security controls. And security controls cannot keep evolving based on how the cyber criminal group is evolving their TTPs, their IOCs, their attack methods, unless you have an understanding around how some of those preemptive cybersecurity insights or threat intelligence insights are available. Because external exposure, ladies and gentlemen, is no longer accidental, it is systemic. And we all need to understand that. Gone are the days you will be provisioning your IT assets based on requests from one particular team. Nowadays, you just need to click a few buttons, and there you go. You have a workload created out there. And if people are not trained, if your workforce is the weak link and not this first layer of defense, if they are not being trained or based on the threats and the evolving threat landscape, then it becomes a situation, and then it becomes a systematic issue. So exposures are no longer accidental. And visibility gaps across OT environment, they also delay, detection and responses. Because uh, via IT into OT, you will, if you do not have the right mechanisms to monitor these, then it becomes difficult for you to understand how some of these will be actually working. Now, enough said and done around, what's the IT/OT convergence, or what are the trends we are able to see. And these are all factual information of how we would like to profile some of the cyber threats groups which are targeting some of the critical infrastructure. Again, these are facts. We are a very non-biased ETLM service provider. We are just working always on facts, and we can see that based on our monitoring, muddy water is quite focused on exploiting critical infrastructure gaps. There is a very clear persistence via operations, the specific operation that this particular group is executing. There are technical executions out there. You can see the primary targets are government, telecom, defense, and of course, the tactics include malware as well as PowerShell. And then there is another group, famous, which is called APT36, and they are more into social engineering. They are social engineering specialists. They target the high net worth individuals or HNIs. They target the society out there. You'll see a lot of WhatsApp based spear phishing or Telegram based spear phishing or bottom based spear phishing, as well as surveillance based intrusions coming from these particular groups. These are happening. This is based on the data our proprietary platform has collected, and this is based on advisories we are giving to our clients and customers as well as partners. If you look at some of the other ones who are famously targeting the Middle East region, there is another APT group called APT 33, and then there is the Handela hack team. They have also very clear targets. Some of them are defense, but then some of them are also the critical infrastructure sectors and industries that are coming in. Not to mention another group which is quite active in the region is Volt Typhoon, as well as Fulcrum Sec and No Name 057. And these have their own targets. It's important to understand critical infrastructure in some shape and form is existing in all of these modus operandis of these cyber criminal groups. So, and these are just snapshot of groups. We monitor more than 2,900 plus cyber criminal groups and operations that these groups are running, almost 3,900 plus operations. So the data is vast. The data is available on our proprietary platform, but these are some of the snapshots we were able to extract out for this particular webinar. So let's now take a look at what's the risk for these sectors, right? So if you're looking at, and hopefully you are able to see the screen, if you're looking at oil and gas, the main is around the OT systems. It's all about aiming for production shutdowns and serious safety hazards being executed. It could be an explosion, it could be a kinetic attack of some kind. That is prevalently seen in oil and gas, and that's also summarized here. At the same time, in the telecom industry, it goes without saying, right? It's a disruption of core network infrastructure. Imagine somebody is not able to pick up a call or pick up a phone and read a message, and the whole society gets disrupted, all the businesses get disrupted, and this is all about nationwide connectivity outage. I come from this part of the world here in Singapore, and we've had our own fair share of such disruptions as well. So this is not something specific to Middle East and Africa or MEA region, but it is prevalently being seen in Middle East and Africa region because of the ongoing geopolitical skirmishes that are happening. And then in the government sector, it's about compromise of data. Citizen data is the biggest currency that is out there that cyber criminal groups are always aiming for, because once I have the citizen data, once I have the details, it's very easy for me to go ahead and create behavioral changes in the society, cause deeply rooted biases in the society, and it becomes a loss of citizen trust, and it becomes threat to the nation's stability, because all of a sudden a very stable nation becomes a nation that is exposed to some of these actions. Now, very clearly, right, how do these attacks actually happen? They specifically happen, always the entry point is reconnaissance. Reconnaissance means they will look out for some of those entry points, some of those weaknesses and gaps which are accessible via internet. That's why it's very important to have a very clear understanding of how lucrative as a target you're looking for cyber criminal. It's one thing understanding and having a control of your perimeter. It's another thing trying to understand what are those weaknesses that the cyber criminal can see, because those are the weaknesses that can get exploited in some of these areas. Then obviously it's credential abuses. Very simple, right? You're using your browser, you click on a link, a malware or a stealer malware gets installed. It does is it needs to read some of the data from your browser cookie, and then that data goes back to the operator of that malware, and it gets sold for some amount. These credentials are bought over by some of these cyber criminals who need to utilize this information to go from reconnaissance to the next stage. And once you get an entry and you establish a footprint, it's all about lateral movement. Because many organizations, many setups, specifically in the critical infrastructure space, is not something that you will be expecting to have some of these cyber criminals in your environment. And that's why the right zoning, the right of understanding of the TTPs and IOCs and tone and texture being utilized by some of these cyber criminals, when not understood, leads into some of these surprise lateral movement. That's why it's important for us to understand the strategic intelligence, the management layer, the who, why, what, when, as we were talking about, and not just the how, not just the IOCs that, all right, here is an IOC, please go block it, please go monitor it. Unless you have the context, you have the context, you'll not be able to save yourself from some of these lateral movements. Then you have the ICS manipulation and the overall persistence, because if a cyber criminal has a footprint out in your environment, he's not going to just wait and next day morning expand. He's going to wait for the right time. And then they are going to go ahead and exploit this based on their goals that they have set out to achieve. Then there is a situation around vendor and ecosystem risk. Ladies and gentlemen, it's very important for us to understand that even if you have platinum grade cyber posture management and controls in your environment, it is that one third party. We are not talking about the enterprise grade third parties who are supporting millions of customers worldwide. We're talking about that one third party down the street or a small organization who's helping you to, automate one of those business processes. And because that third party is integrated into your environment, it becomes very easy for somebody to go ahead and execute the attack as I explained in the previous slide. And once they get a footprint into your into your third party or your supply chain, it's very easy for a cyber criminal to come into your environment. So please understand, you are only good as your weakest link. And in most of the cases, most of the cyber criminal activities or cyber attacks that we have seen in the last few years, and specifically in the last 6 months, there is a huge footprint around the third party ecosystem being compromised. So it could be a situation wherein there could be, direct access to some of the operational systems. It could be a scenario wherein, compromised firmware. It could be insecure or unverified remote accesses, or it could be supply chain attacks which are being presented out there that will get exploited. Or even at times it could be just a single vendor doing some small processing, could be payroll processing, but if there are connections into your environment, it becomes difficult for and if you do not have a visibility, it will be very difficult for you to fend off an attack, and before you realize, your data is actually out there and you're already compromised. So very important, when we are aiming for rapid expansions, when we are aiming for execution of some of these use cases, and we think that, all right, let's just get any vendor out there and let's just go ahead and execute this expansion using that vendor, please be absolutely careful. Please have a mechanism, have a tool, have a capability that can give you a very clear understanding of what are those exposure risks, what are those gaps in their external attack surface. Are they patching their systems regularly, and you have a way of verifying it? Are there any data breaches related to that third party? Are there any brand abuses related to that third party? Please have that assessment done clearly. Otherwise, what we're trying to see, this is an inherent risk in the MEA region based on the critical infrastructure landscape that we are assessing. Here are some of the real life cases. Hijacked infrastructure, right? You can see that some of the recent incidents in the Gulf region, has come across some of the infrastructures being hijacked. In this particular case, there are weeks or if not months of downtimes that is being executed, and that creates usually market instability and is also having a very strong signal of geopolitical footprint to it. So cyber and physical threats are converging. That's the whole idea. It's a real world scenario. Why a cyber having an impact on the real world is something that we are able to see very clearly out there. And here are some of the exposed endpoints and lateral movements that we're talking about. Initial compromise in the IT environment, as we spoke about. Then there is a lateral movement. There could be an installation of a malware, or there could be an interaction, unauthorized interaction with some of the control systems to probably, have some data sent out, have some unauthorized instructions being executed. Quite a many times in today's scenario, I could give you an example that everybody is going through the AI route. You can create your in-house AI prompts, chatbots, and if you are not guardrailing them to execute some of those instructions, then it becomes a double-edged sword for you. So what this results into, very clearly, as I was explaining, lost production, operational downtime, and a lot of regulatory scrutiny, something that can actually take your business down. Because if all those gaps are very clearly understood by some of those government agencies and regulators, then I think it will become difficult for you to be a viable system, or viable enterprise. And this is compounded by the fact that most of our OT systems are legacy systems, and the rapid IT OT convergence is not something that is going to help you address some of these cybersecurity situations. All right, and what are some of those emerging trends? We all need to understand, and we have seen this, right? Not only in the Middle East and Africa region, but what we are trying to see is there are lots of AI driven attacks. There's a huge amount of autonomous malwares and deepfakes out there. It could be a very simple deepfake and somebody trying to say, hey, let's go and change the composition of the water filtering plant because we believe the input from the lake or the sea has changed a bit. That can be catastrophic. It could mean, hey, can we change the voltage frequency? It could mean that, hey, can we route the distribution channel via a different mechanism and not the one which is existing out there? All these things are happening out there. These threats are evolving and they are automated. So if you do not have the right intelligence, it becomes very difficult. And what we are starting to see is there's a lot of quantum leap into some of these. Uh, Understand it this way, right? If you have a data which is encrypted, currently it takes X amount of days or months to break the encryption. With quantum, that is changing heavily. That days can come down to hours and minutes. And the impact is very clear. Impact means that your attacks become faster, your disruption becomes faster, access to some of this encrypted data in a de-encrypted manner is easier, which means the next stage of attacks are also going to become easier. So, what are these new attack surfaces? What we are starting to see is a lot of satellite systems and operational technology convergences. If you have direct Wi-Fi to a satellite-based provider, that is going to expose you directly. It's also about GPS and GNSS spoofing and jamming. A lot of those signals are being utilized to manipulate the attack signals out there. It's also about remote infrastructure exposure, because your IoT or edge devices, they increase the connectivity, but they also increase the possibility of executing some of these attacks, because more connectivity through some of these are giving cyber criminals a possibility to have access to some of these workloads, and that is increasing the critical exposure. So, of course, there is a very clear MEA relevance, because it's very high risk to the primary industry in the region, which is oil and gas, but also gets expanded to some of the other areas of critical infrastructure, which will impact any business that is running out there, and which will impact even the society in day to day. So we keep talking about this preemptive security framework. What is this preemptive security framework that we are saying that is very important for us to have a better visibility and for us to have better control. First and foremost, your visibility should not be restricted to within the perimeter. You need to know what's happening out there in your external threat landscape. What's the interest from the cyber criminal? What are the vulnerabilities? How these attacks are getting propagated? What's the mapping to a cyber criminal landscape? Any campaign that they might be running, any malware strain that they might be having. And that's where it needs to also connect to intelligence. Remember the who, why, what, when, how. That is your mantra. Unless you have a very clear understanding of who, why, what, when, how, and unless you have an ongoing monitoring, you will not be able to protect, because you will not be able to move to the protection layer. And it is the combination of these three that should drive the awareness layer as well. Human resource in your organization is should cannot remain a weakest link, needs to become the first line of defense. And that can only happen when you have visibility, when you have intelligence, when you have the right protection of your ecosystem, and that is fed into your awareness campaigns, training your employees and human resources and operators. And then finally, it's also about prediction. It's not only about understanding what is proactively happening, as in an example, a lookalike website or a domain or a phishing campaign being out there. It's also understanding what is happening in the adversary landscape, so that you can catch a very clear understanding of what's being planned from a cyber attack point of view rather than what is being executed. So, bottom line, security must be continuous, has to be intelligence led, has to be proactive and predictive and not just reactive. Please do not wait for an incident and start thinking about how I need to remediate this. Yes, is that not required? It is required, but it cannot be the main premise of your cyber posture management. And then that's where we expand this to national and organizational collaboration, right? It's all about private partnership. It's all about threat intelligence sharing, workforce training, and alignment with national goals. So remember, it's about collaboration, it's about sharing, and it's about skills which are key to building strong cyber resilience. Unless we share, unless we are being objective about it, unless we go by sharing, I'm not saying that go ahead and post items on LinkedIn or on some social media. It has to be in the right forum with the right people for the execution that is happening out there, both at a national and an organization level. Unless that collaboration is there, and unless we are being transparent to each other, it will become very difficult to handle some of these cyber criminal groups. So if you're talking about national scale resilience, it's about building the ecosystem. That is the goal. But it starts by making sure that some of these alerts are being fed into each other, some of the details of what is happening out there, what are some of the tools, or what are some of the strengths that each industry is having, is being shared across the industry, so that we start by visibility, we strengthen the controls based on lessons learned across the visibility, and we build a long-term resilience. This cannot be just done at an organization level. This cannot be just done at a government level. It needs to happen together in consolidation. So, as leaders, what you must do, you must invest in preemptive visibility. Gone are the days you will be able to just run through, oh, I have a firewall, I have an antivirus, I have an IPS or a WAF. I'm not saying they're not needed. Please don't misunderstand me. All I'm trying to say is, unless you know what's happening in that external threat landscape, unless you have the preemptive capability, unless you have a technology which is giving you these insights, just utilizing the traditional controls and tools is not going to work. Then have an AI enabled capability for your defense. The cyber criminals are using it. So you should have a capability. And when I say AI capability, I'm not saying that go to some of those OSINT or open AI platforms and go and start typing information out there, because the public LLMs are also feeding on that. And that information can also be taken out by some of these cyber criminals. I'm talking about having such a technology wherein when you are utilizing AI to understand what's your prioritization, how you need to remediate this, what's happening in the cyber criminal ecosystem around this particular vulnerability, what's your real exposure score, what's your real hackability score. Unless those salience empowered by AI are presented to you, you are not doing yourself a favor, because the cyber criminal is utilizing AI out there to, go ahead and increase the scale and momentum of attack. And it's also about, enforcing regulation and collaboration. You are not fighting this battle alone. You will not be able to win if you are fighting it alone. It has to be collaboration, and there needs to be very clear mechanisms between each one of them. So leaders must invest early, must use AI smartly, and should enforce strong governance. Unless you have that, it becomes very difficult for us to tide away what is coming our way, and get one better from some of these cyber criminals. So, what are the call to actions here? Assess your external attack surface to start with, and some of the OT exposure, and then go into the areas of vulnerability intelligence, brand intelligence, digital risk intelligence, situational awareness intelligence, and predictive threat intelligence. Combine that and have some of those capabilities around your third party risk management intelligence, and then expand that into your awareness programs, and if possible, specifically in the critical infrastructure space, you should have sector tailored deception intelligence capabilities out there. You need to have these capabilities. Otherwise, you will not be able to adapt a preemptive security framework. It is very important to have a very clear understanding of what's your structured threat exposure like, what's your hackability like, what are some of the risks that you are carrying out there. And then, of course, engage with regional initiatives like OTMEC and others, but focus on building resilience beyond traditional defenses. Traditional defenses are there and they are doing their part, but the adversary has moved on. The external threat landscape is evolving every now and then. So act now, assess and collaborate, and build resilience. That would be the mantra out there. Now, of course, I have a few other slides from an appendix standpoint, trying to help you understand how the ransomware is expanding in the region. What are some of the dark web observations out there? I think once you have attended and you will be presented this documentation, you are of course able to access that. And if there are any follow-up questions, you can reach out to both me as well as the CyberWaze team. All right. And I think that covered the salience of what we have. I think we can now open the floor to any questions that might be there, and I'll be more than happy to take those questions and answer them.
Indeed, and thank you so much, Dr. Lal, for that very insightful and interesting session. Now the floor is open for questions, just as Dr. Saurabh has mentioned. Please post your questions on LinkedIn or here on AirMeet, and we will be addressing that. Or more of Dr. Saurabh Lal will be addressing your questions accordingly. I guess we can start with some questions from our audience.
Sure.
And yeah, we have one question
Mhm.
from Amar Zahid. With the rise of state aligned cyber actors, which is very relevant, I think, to what's currently happening in the region, how should CISOs in critical sectors evolve their defense strategies beyond traditional tools? You've probably already gave us an idea on this. So if you can just lighten up the audience, please.
No, absolutely. And that's a fantastic question and a very relevant question. So thank you for asking that. Let's understand in a summary, based on also what we have covered out there, right? Traditional tools are reactive. So there is a need for CISOs to shift towards consuming predictive threat intelligence, preemptive cybersecurity insights, understanding very clearly how the adversary behavior is changing and being able to track that, and have a continuous mechanism to track how some of those weaknesses or gaps are existing in your environment, be it your attack surface or vulnerabilities intelligence, not VAPT, but continuous monitoring around that, how some of the digital risk scenarios or brand intelligence scenarios are playing out, and basically have a continuous monitoring around this overall connection with how a cyber criminal is possibly connected or exploiting this. Because unless we understand as CISOs who's targeting us and why now, as a very important factor, we will not be able to understand what the cyber criminal is after, and hence we'll not be able to protect ourselves, and we'll be always playing a catch-up game. So I would very clearly say, uh, predictive threat intelligence, preemptive cybersecurity capability, adversary tracking, as well as continuous monitoring across those 7 8 pillars that I spoke about, is what is required from the sizes.
Thank you very much. Now we can move on to the next question.
Yep.
In a region heavily reliant on global vendors and contractors, how can organizations better secure their supply chain without slowing down the operations? Maybe just a recap of what you've already gave us earlier.
Absolutely. Trust me, ladies and gentlemen, supply chain ecosystem is the biggest risk any organization in today's scenario carries. So there is only one way. Gone are the days you could set out a 250 line item Excel sheet to a third party vendor and ask them to answer. And I have not met any one third party vendor who will answer no to any of those, and you will think that everything is fine. There is a need to continuously risk monitor and exposure monitor the third party. It's very important to understand what is their digital footprint, and have an exposure tracking mechanism. And this, when I say, this is all technology enabled, right? Because unless we have an exposure risk based prioritization instead of some blanket controls that, oh, are you A, B, and C certified, or are you patching everything regularly, and the third party vendor says yes I am, but unless you have a visibility around their external attack surface and you see 99 vulnerabilities out there, unless you have that monitoring out there, you will never be able to be sure. So I would recommend utilize the platform, utilize the capability to make sure that your TPRM is well managed, to make sure that before you adopt a third party, you are doing this kind of an analysis, and the continuous monitoring happens so that there is no adverse impact to business operations.
Thank you so much. I hope that answers your question, Uzair Azim. The next question is from Mohammed, and his question is, what is the biggest challenge organizations are currently facing in this area? I think he means in this region when it comes to threat intelligence or brand protection.
I think one is the lack of visibility. Do you have the right visibility out there? Second is, do you have the right capability onboarded to look at an unbiased view? It's very easy in today's scenario, right? That you utilize something, and some particular vendor or service provider will come to you, hey, by the way, I mean, this is credential harvesting, right? Or harvesting data that I have identified so many gaps and weaknesses about you. Are you aware of it? Or creating that kind of urgency for you to make that decision. Be very careful. You should utilize a particular platform or a technology which gives you that unbiased view across all those 7 8 areas that I had identified, and not have multiple tools. And then at that point of time, when you are able to categorize and have a very clear exposure risk rated based on urgency, impact, and prioritization, what you need to remediate, how you need to remediate, and what's your real exposure score like. When you have that, then you will have a better, full blown, analyze cyber posture risks and threats, and you'll have the right way to remediate. So it's not only about identification, it's about making sure that it is personalized to you. It's about making sure that it gives you the right prioritization, and it also tells you what to remediate and how to remediate. So if you have all these spectrums together with, you have that visibility across 7 8 pillars that I was talking about, I think you have a win-win solution. And please make sure that you have the right technology, which is not giving you urgency to act just for the sake of it. It is giving it to you based on facts and observations that can be verified.
Thank you very much for that. I think we have three more questions from
Go
the
ahead.
audience. And the next question is from Sana Syed, which she's asking, many organizations still operate legacy OT systems
Yeah.
connected to modern IT environments. How exposed are these systems today in the region?
No, thank you, Sana, for asking that question. And it all depends on what is the level and the capability of IT OT convergence they have employed. At the same time, if they have legacy systems, if they do not have a capability to keep updating it and patching it, then they need to have the right security controls in place and the right segmentations and zoning, so that via IT into OT, you're not able to get those exposed. If your question is how exposed we are, and I'm not trying to scare you away, but the landscape out there is very exposed, because just the fact that we're trying to augment our capability, we are trying to have business models which can make us grow faster, which can make the economy run faster. I'm not saying that that is not required, that is required, but not at the risk of security. We have seen lots of those issues coming out there. We monitor a lot of cyber criminal chatters where there is an interest, there are exploits being sold out there, there are access lists being sold out there, trying to expose the IT/OT convergence. So, based on all these data points, I'm actually quite worried that many of these attacks are happening or are at the planning stage, and the information is not coming out. But we as society, we as the region, is taking a huge brunt and is taking a huge risk. So, I would say it is currently a huge, huge risk that organizations are probably not mitigating properly.
That's very interesting, and I hope that answers your question, Sana. Now, for our next question, we're down to the last two. Another question from Uzair. How should business leaders quantify cyber risk today, especially when attacks can lead to operational shutdowns and not just data breaches?
Fantastic. That's a fantastic question. So cyber risks, they are always should be possibly quantified. And I'm making an assumption here that you are consuming a preemptive cybersecurity capability and platform, and you have the predictive intelligence capabilities. Always around, what's your downtime cost, and what potential revenue loss will that cause? If you have a downtime of 2 days, what's the revenue out there? At the same time, what's the regulatory penalty? And the penalty will not only happen because there is an exposure out there, the penalty will also happen because if you're not utilizing a tool and you are not having the controls in sync with how your external threat landscape changes. And at the same time, operational disruption. So it's about moving from technical severity to financial and operational impact. That is the key. And you will not have this visibility unless you have a platform or a capability or a tool out there which is giving you those areas out there being clearly identified. So unless you have a very clear visibility, and let me repeat again, very clear visibility around your attack surface, these are entry points into your environment and how that connects to an adversary landscape. Unless you don't have an intelligence around how some of these weaknesses and gaps or vulnerabilities are being heavily exploited, and you do not have the right prioritization mechanism to remediate it. Unless you have a very clear visibility around brand intelligence and digital risk, lookalike domains, siphoned, impersonated VIPs, or maybe suspicious mobile apps, or infringement of your products, or deepfakes, or even leaked credentials, PII, CII data, and stuff like that. And you don't have a visibility around some of the predictive threat intelligence. and you don't take this capability and understand what are your supply chain risk as well as what's happening out there in the industry, unless you don't have all these, you will not be able to achieve the financial and operational impact understanding around these, and hence you will not be able to clearly analyze what are the probabilities or the hackability and the potential exposure that you might be carrying.
Thank you very much. I think for the sake of time, we will be down to the last question. We have 1 more minute, and before we close our webinar, it could be the message that you want to leave for our audience, Dr. Saurabh. If you were advising a CISO in the energy or telecom sector today, what are the top actions that they should prioritize in the next 3 months?
Now that's a great question, and that's a pertinent question. I would want to keep it very simple, right? Have a clear understanding of what are those real threats and risks. You need to understand how these are personalized to you. Have a very clear understanding of what's your external threat landscape is looking like, who's that adversary who's interested in you, and what are the trends you are able to see in some of your industry peers. Then very clearly have an understanding on what's your roadmap to remediation. What is the prioritization? Because if you have 50 or 100 or 2000 such observations coming into you, you need to be able to prioritize and remediate that. So unless those initiatives are working, and unless you get the capability of having a visibility, and then get the capability of understanding some of the preemptive enablements and operationalize them, you will always be playing a catch-up game, because it's not only about having a visibility of what's happening within your perimeter, it's also understanding who are the movers and shakers who can cause a reputational harm or a financial impact, even if originating from geopolitical consideration. So have the right visibility, have the right understanding of what could be coming your way and what is getting propagated out there, have the right technology, have the right platform and capability helping you gain this understanding and visibility so that you can move from your current state to the next state, and then start planning your next stages beyond the 90 days.
Well, thank you very much for that very insightful and very thought-provoking insights, Dr. Saurabh. And I think that was the last question for our session for today. And once again, I would like to thank everyone for joining us in today's session. And massive, we're grateful to your expert insights, Dr. Saurabh Lal. I think I've mentioned that quite a few times today, but yes, thank you so much for sharing us your thoughts about it. So just a little closing message for everyone watching us today. Do you want to address one very quick takeaway for all our audience?
Uh, Stay vigilant, stay protected, and have the right visibility.
Perfect. So, and as yes, so thank you so much again for attending. And if you'd like to continue the conversation, if you're interested or if you have more questions, please feel free to reach out to us at CyberWaze, and we will be getting in touch with you as soon as possible. And you all have a great day. Thank you so much once again for joining us in today's webinar.
Thank you. Have a nice day.